All right, so we are going to start our unit on probability. So we are in our books right now on page 711. And remember, I expect you to write down everything that I am writing down. So when we're going to talk about a little bit vocabulary, so at the top of the page, it says probability is the chance that some event will occur. A simple event is one outcome or a collection of outcomes. So when we talk about it in math terms, it says a possible result in a probability experiment. So it's all of the possible answers, in other words, or selections that we could have in a probability event. So for example, if I had a bag of marbles and I had a blue, a red, and a yellow marble, the possible outcomes are blue, red, and yellow because those are the only color of marbles I have in the bag. So if we were talking about a real world definition or what we would say in our own words, we would probably write the way that something turns out. So right here, the way something turns out. It's a possible outcome, it's a possible result. Okay, so if you go down to the real world link, we're going to talk a little bit more about some specific examples. So for a sledding trip, you're randomly going to select one of your 4 hats shown. So we need to complete the table to show the possible outcomes. Well, if we look in this picture, I have a green hat that I could choose. I have a blue hat, so that's a possible outcome. I have a red hat, so that's another outcome. Oops, sorry, red hat. Or I have a purple hat. So those are the 4 choices or 4 outcomes that I have. Now, if we wanted to write a ratio that compares the number of blue hats to the total number of hats, I would, first of all, blue hats comes first, so I'm going to write my ratio with the number of blue hats on top. So I have 1, that's blue hat. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 total hats, so that one goes on bottom. So my ratio is 1/4. Okay? Now, number 2, it says describe a hat display in which you would have a better chance of selecting a red hat. So if I had, let's say I had 3 red hats and 1 blue hat, I have a better chance of picking a red hat because I have more of them. So this would give me a better chance of selecting a red hat because I have more red hats to choose from. Okay? We're going to go ahead and turn the page and talk a little bit more about, alright, so we're going to talk a little bit more vocabulary about probability. So up at the top of the page, it says probability of an event is a ratio that compares the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. When it talks about favorable outcomes, we're talking about the outcomes we want to happen, so what we desire to happen. If we want to pick a red hat, if we want to pick a blue marble, that would be our favorable outcome because it's what we want to happen. Then we also have that number, so the favorable in our ratio goes on top, right here, and then the total number of our possible outcomes is going to go on bottom. So when we were talking about our blue hat, we wanted to pick a blue hat, so we had 1 blue hat out of 4 total hats. So our favorable on top of our total. Okay? Probability can also be written as a percent and as a decimal. I am going to expect you to write all 3 answers when you are finding the probability. We've already talked about how we change a fraction into a decimal and a decimal into a percent. So now that I have my fraction, I can take 1 and divide by 4. We can use our calculator to do that. We get the decimal 0.25. So there's my decimal answer. And now to change that into a percent, I move my decimal back 2 places. So I get 25%. So my 3 answers for finding probability are fraction, decimal, and percent. Okay? I will expect all 3 answers on your assignments and tests. Okay, we have some more vocabulary to talk about though. So down here we have a spectrum. So we have a spectrum that goes from impossible to certain, and we're going to talk about what that vocabulary means when it comes to probability. So over here, right here I have drawn a bag of marbles, okay? So I have a bag of marbles. In that bag of marbles, if I was to say 100% probability, the probability of me drawing a marble is 100% because that's the only thing I have in that bag. Okay, so that would be a probability that I would say is certain because it's 100% true that I'm going to pull a marble out of that bag. Okay, if I go to the opposite side of the spectrum, impossible, if I said the probability of me choosing a yellow marble, that's impossible because there's not a yellow marble in my bag. So there's no way, 0% chance of me pulling a yellow marble because there's none in there. So that would be described as an impossible event. If we go to the middle, when it says as likely to happen as not, I have 10 total marbles in this bag. So my total again goes on bottom. I have 10 total marbles. And I have 5 of them are green. So 5 out of the 10 marbles are green. So I have a 50% chance, or 1/2 odds, of picking a green marble. So that's as likely to happen as not. Another example of that is flipping a coin. So on a coin, you have 2 possible outcomes. You could flip it and it could land on heads. You could flip it, it could land on tails. The probability of me flipping the coin and it landing on heads is just as likely to happen as me flipping the coin and not landing on heads. So that would be described as 50%, 0.5, or 1/2 probability. Okay? If we talk about something that is unlikely to happen. So in my bag, if I said the probability of selecting an orange marble, it's not impossible because I do have an orange marble in the bag, but it's not very likely to happen because I only have 1 out of the 10 marbles. There's not very many in there that are orange. So it's probably unlikely for me to pull an orange marble, but I could do it. So that situation would be described as unlikely. When we talk about likely then, I have let's see. Something that would be likely in this situation is me pulling a, I have to redraw my marbles. All right, sorry about that. I had to pause and redraw my bag of marbles. Okay, so I still have 10 total marbles in the bag, but now I changed it so that I have 6 green marbles. So now I could say that it's likely for me to pull a green marble because I have more than half of the bag being green. So my chances of me pulling a green marble are now more likely than not. So it's described as a likely situation. Okay? And then again, it talks about probability can be written as a fraction, decimal, and percent. So then we have all of those listed underneath our spectrum. At the very bottom here, it says the outcomes occur at random if each outcome is equally likely to occur. Okay? All right, so now we're going to talk about actually calculating probability of events. You are going to need a scratch piece of paper. So grab a scratch piece of paper. And you need to write down everything that I write down. Okay? So first of all, what I want you to write down is we are going to write the symbol. So when we look at this, when we talk about probability, we're going to have P, and then in parentheses, we are going to write our favorable outcome. So the probability of selecting a yellow marble. That's what that notation means, is the probability of selecting a yellow marble. How we find that is we write the number of favorable, or in our case, the number of yellow marbles over the number of total marbles. Okay, and then we could use that fraction then and change it into a decimal and then into a percent. Okay, so that is the equation that we are going to use, is the number of favorable over the number of total outcomes. So in our first example here, we're going to have, they call it a cube with 6 sides. We call it a dice. Okay, so there is a dice, and on a dice we have 6 possible answers, right? Or outcomes. We could roll a 1, we could roll a 2, we could roll a 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are our total outcomes, because those are all the possibilities that we could roll when we roll a dice. So if I asked you, what's the probability that I roll a 12 with 1 dice? That's impossible. I don't even have that outcome. So the probability of me rolling a 12 with 1 dice is 0. Not going to happen. Okay? We actually want to find the probability of rolling a 6, because it says the probability of 6. So I'm going to write the ratio of favorable over total outcomes. My favorable, how many possibilities do I have up there for rolling a 6? Well, there's only one. This one, right? That's the only way that I can get the desired outcome. So I have one way to roll a 6. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total options to roll. So we could say that the probability of me rolling a 6 is 1 out of 6, or 1/6. We could then type this into our calculator and take 1 divided by 6, and we get something like 0.16 6. Okay, and if we round it to the nearest hundredth, this 6 is in the hundredths place, so we would tell it to round up, so it'd be 0.17. Okay, that's my decimal. Now I still need to write it as a percent, so I need to move my decimal 2 places, 1, 2, and I get 17%. So the probability of me rolling a 6 on a dice is 1/6, 0.17, or 17%. All right, we're going to do one more example together. So again, you need to be writing this on a scratch piece of paper. So this time we have a spinner, and it's divided into 8 equal sections numbered 1 through 8. So I'm going to draw it out. So I have a spinner, and we're splitting it into 8 equal sections. Okay, so my sections might not be equal. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So 8 equal sections, and it's numbered 1 through 8. We need to find the probability of spinning a 1. Okay, so if I look here, how many ones do I have on there? How many outcomes work that I could roll 1? Well, there's only 1 right there. Okay, so 1 out of the total number of possible outcomes, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 possible outcomes that I could spin. So 1 out of the 8 is a probability of me spinning a 1. Okay, again, you can type in your calculator 1 divided by 8, and you will get the decimal of 0.125. We're going to round it to the nearest hundredth. So my 2 is in the hundredths place. The 5 tells the 2 to round up, so we get the decimal of 0.13. And then to change it into a percent, I move the decimal back 1, 2, and I get 13%. So my answers for the probability of spinning a 1 is 1/8, 0.13, and 13%. All right, what I would like you to do is go ahead and pause this video, and I want you to do Got It A